Hi, I'm Gail Ann Dorsey, bass player for Gwen Stefani, currently on tour in the US and about to do a world tour for the rest of the summer. And Ernie Ball's come down to ask me some questions about my favorite bass in the whole world, music band Stingray. I started playing bass when I was 14, and it was an accident. I started playing guitar when I was 9 years old. I'm a completely self-taught musician. I have no real formal music training other than what I learned from other musicians that I played with all my life who were better than me, who taught me things along the way. I started at 14. Again, it was an accident. I was looking for work in the summer. It was 1976. And I was living in Philadelphia, where I was born and raised, and looking for summer work with a band that was actually making some money. So I went to audition for some top 40 bands, but nobody wanted a guitar player. They all wanted a bass player or a drummer. It was always guitarist seeks, drummer seeks, lead singer looking for bass player or drummer, but everybody played the guitar already. So I borrowed a friend's bass, went to an audition, and that was my first job. One of my favorite bass players of all time is Nathan East, and I didn't kind of discover him really until the 80s. He also produced my first solo album on Warner Brothers Records in 1987 that was only released in the UK and Europe. It wasn't an American release, called The Corporate World. And Nathan, I loved his playing. I'd heard him on so many records like Saving All My Love for You, Whitney Houston, and he's played for Anita Baker, Eric Clapton, and just countless people. Joe Osborne was the bass player on a lot of things in the 60s and 70s, probably into the late 70s. He played on all the Partridge Family records and the Carpenters and Olivia Newton-John and The Fifth Dimension and Barbra Streisand and all of that kind of genre of pop music. And that is my absolute favorite style of bass playing ever. It's funny that I've played with like rock people like Bowie and Tears for Fears bands that are a little bit more heavier, but my actual favorite type of music is more the very kind of conventional pop. Other bass influences would be John Deacon of Queen. Later on, now people like Michelle and Degiacello. Charles Mingus, even though I'm not a jazz player at all, is also another one of my favorite bass players of all time. Well, the first time I saw a Stingray bass was Louis Johnson and the Brothers Johnson in the 70s. And then later on I saw other players who had Music Man Stingray basses, and to me they always just sounded so warm and potent, and it just had a lot of personality. And I just vowed that, when I'm going to become a professional bass player, that's the bass that I need to play. It would have to be a Stingray. This is Maryland. A few years back with the Bowie band, we did a tour of the 5 boroughs of New York City, which had never been done before. I mean, literally, it was just like we played in very small clubs, and we hit Staten Island, the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn. There was a photographer who made a book out of the tour, and Marilyn was featured very heavily in this book. There's a great shot of her. This bass was my first Music Man. Bought at the Bass Center in London, and it actually was a present. My first tour that I ever did was for a band called the Thrashing Doves. I had been renting Stingrays when I did sessions, or anybody who could afford to kind of rent one for me for a gig. And when I got the job for the Thrashing Doves tour, they bought this bass for me as a gift for the tour. And it did come from the Bass Center in London. I've had a couple of different things and obviously I purchased a clear plate. And I had a couple of things in here, like collages and things that I'd made, actual little art pieces. Until one day I was reading a magazine and I saw this little picture of Marilyn Monroe. It's very small, this picture, in a magazine from the last, not that I'm a huge Marilyn Monroe fan, it's just was something about the photograph. that made me think of how I feel when I play the bass sometimes, or any instrument. She's reading her script. It's the last movie she ever did. She's looking pretty perplexed and trying to concentrate very hard. And that's a little bit how I feel when I'm trying to play the bass. I mean, music anyway is quite a challenge, but it's also like the hugest reward when you get it right. So the bass became Marilyn. And it's been on every single record I've ever had a chance to play on. Every tour I've ever done is probably the only bass that is consistent. And it's just my favorite. I have been lucky enough to be to play with some amazing artists for the last 20 years, I would say. When I started as a female playing bass, certainly I'd say in the early 80s, when I was 20, when I really was taking it seriously, and I thought, oh, I think I really want to be a bass player now. It's not only about the guitar, but I really, really understand and appreciate the bass. There were very few women who played. I think in a funny way, it might have worked to my advantage, but at the same time, it's like you have to be prepared. You might get opportunities, but if you're not able to follow through when the opportunity arises, then the opportunity is actually wasted. So, you know, I put in my hours and I practiced, and I tried not to be discouraged, and my female role models in terms of who I think are extraordinary musicians, as well as singers and songwriters, are Ann and Nancy Wilson of Heart. When I saw them when I was 14 years old, that was what said to me, it doesn't matter, you can be a woman and you can rock out, because those ladies rock out, in my opinion. And still, no one has really kind of topped what they do in a lot of ways, not that I've seen anyway. I'm happy to kind of represent. I do the best I can to be visible for other women, to see that it's possible to do this. I don't think that, you know, it makes a difference what gender you are, as long as you know how to play your instrument and you put in the time. You know, I always tell female artists, aspiring female players, artists, whatever, to, you know, get themselves a good bass, a good guitar, a good amp, whatever it is that they need to work with. I think there are a lot more women playing right now than when I started, which is a great thing. I just hope that there can be more. This is Gail Ann Dorsey here in Marysville, California at the Gwen Stefani concert, and I just want to thank Ernie Ball for coming down. It's been a pleasure to talk about my favorite basses in the world, stingrays and bongos. Go get yourself one. Thanks. Bye.